Okay. That would be the first time I've done it, but I'm like...
Hey, the important thing is you caught it now.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we'll start over.
Okay.
That's so... I was like, why isn't the button red? I was like, oh, I never pushed it. That's why. Okay. Welcome back to Rock Island Line. I'm your host, Annika O'Melia. Today, I'm joined by Christie Adamson, co-founder of The Third Place, a daytime drop-in center for individuals experiencing homelessness. Christie lives in downtown Rock Island, and she brings years of experience in homelessness services to our community and to this conversation. With homelessness rising across the country, in Illinois and here in Rock Island County, at the same time as the downtown Rock Island revitalization efforts are in full swing, the city surprised Christie and her colleagues by introducing a proposed moratorium on homelessness services in the downtown Rock Island area, thereby threatening the opening of her organization and the expansion of services in our community. Christie and I discuss her life living downtown with her husband and daughter, explore the concerns folks have about homelessness, and acknowledge how this debate has actually sparked deeper connections and conversations with neighbors and the wider community. Stay with us. This is a candid, hopeful conversation about belonging, public space, and how Rock Island can retain its fundamental spirit while addressing hard issues. If you like what I'm doing here at Rock Island Line, please visit www.rockislandline.com, where you can read articles, listen to and watch more episodes, and even donate to support the work it takes to make this evolving project happen. And now, my conversation with Christie. I'm here today with Christie Adamson from The Third Place, and welcome, Christie, to the Rock Island Line.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And as with every guest, we start by exploring your Rock Island story. So where does your journey with Rock Island begin?
So my journey living in Rock Island actually started after I moved back home from a college that I was attending. I attended Luther College for a year in Iowa.
In Decorah?
In Decorah, yes.
I love Decorah.
Yes, you can't not love Decorah. It's a beautiful little town. But prior to going to Luther, I had been an exchange student in Bulgaria for a year and had to pick out my college and sort of my trajectory before I decided to be an exchange student. And after I was an exchange student, everything changed for me. So I ended up still attending Luther for a year, but then kind of had other plans for my future and left. And moved back home briefly, and then moved into an apartment, actually a rental house with a few high school friends for a while I attended Blackhawk and before I went to Augustana, which is where I graduated from. So I started living in Rock Island in a rental house off of, I think it was like 8.5 Street. I remember it had a half because that was so unique. With some friends when I was very young, and for the most part have stayed in Rock Island ever since. My husband and I lived in 2 different lofts in downtown Rock Island for several years, and then moved to Moline for a year right after we had our daughter, but then have been back ever since. And we've lived in downtown Rock Island in the house that we own now for 11 years.
So where were you born and raised? I think I missed that part. In Decorah, or that's just where you went to college?
Nope, that's just where I went to college. I was born and raised in Sherrard, Illinois.
Okay, so on the Illinois side of the river in Sherrard, not
Yep.
too far from Rock Island.
No, we called this going into the cities.
Yes, this was the big city kind of coming in from
Yes.
the...
Yes.
And so what was it like to live in Rock Island for the first time as you started living with some friends, and what did you think of us?
Yeah. Well, I loved the access to things. Obviously, when you grow up in the country, you get used to like driving in once a week to get your groceries and having to be more planful about things. So I initially loved just that I didn't have to be that planful about things. If I forgot something at the store, it was easy to go get it. And I loved kind of the community around Augustana. I loved some of the things up on the hilltop. Back then, the district was really booming with life, and I loved all of that as well. And obviously, having left a small town in Sherrard and lived abroad for a year at a young age, I also liked people who were different than me. And I found a lot of that kind of in the community here in Rock Island.
So did you meet your husband in Rock Island then?
No, I met my husband through a fellow Rock Islander, though. He graduated from Rocky. My husband lived with a friend of mine, and I met him through that. My husband graduated from Moline High School, so he's a Quad Cityan too.
So we have recruited you guys in.
Yeah.
You know, you both grew up in the Quad Cities and chose Rock Island as your home, and have done, because tell me a little bit about, I don't know all the details, but he was involved with comedy sports. And so what sorts of things have you two done since you've created a life here in Rock Island?
Yeah, and I think that is also what really rooted us to Rock Island, was that my husband and his family ran comedy sports out of the Establishment Theater for about a decade. And prior to that, his father started a tiny lunch deli called Mama Compton's that was down here in a couple of different storefronts for several years. They served sort of the business district lunch, soup, salad, sandwiches. It was an adorable little place that had wonderful, wonderful food for the time that it was open. And so running both of those businesses, we liked being in proximity to where we were working as well, and like really loved Rock Island because our businesses were here. So that also kind of drug us and kept us in Rock Island.
So small business owners and family in that kind of small business in the Rock Island downtown, and then decided to live pretty close to downtown. You guys live pretty much, I mean,
we
downtown,
are actually
right?
downtown. Yeah. Yep.
With a family, which most people might not think that moms and dads and kids are living in the downtown area, but you are.
Yeah, we love it. Like my daughter takes classes at the Center for Living Arts, and so it was cool this summer to be living in a community where she could walk from our house down to the center and walk home after summer camp. So things like that we really love about Rock Island. I love that there's the farmers market down here that we can walk to. I love that the riverfront is down here. I really, I think also because of living in Europe, appreciate and want to live in a walkable community.
So we've now discovered, since we talked getting ready to do this podcast, that my daughter also does Center for the Living Arts.
Yes.
It's such a gem in the Quad Cities.
It is a gem.
And so you let your daughter walk from your house to the Center for the Living Arts and then walk home.
Yeah.
I think some people would gasp. They'd be like,
absolutely,
you let your kiddo, 7th grader, walk around downtown Rock Island alone. It's not far, but yeah, I think some people would be like, you can't do that. Rock Island is dangerous. That's not,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Rock Island has been fighting that stigma for as long as we have lived here. I personally feel very safe in Rock Island. And obviously I feel like it's a safe community for my daughter as well. I mean, we're the type of parents that teach her all of the safety skills, but we've also allowed our daughter to meet and get to know a lot of people that are a lot different than her. So in general, I think she's not as shy or afraid of people as other kids might be at that age. Through exposure, through the work that I do and lots of traveling that we've done with her. So, and she has a cell phone. I'm not going to lie. That probably also helps us feel I can track her on it when she was walking back and forth and, make sure she got home and all of that as well. So
I talked a little bit about this with Dr. Williams. We talked about the Anxious Generation book.
Yep.
And there's also this other movement called, I can't remember what it's called now. It's not Free Range Kids. It's not that. But there was a group in Rock Island that tried to get this going. But it's the allowing your children to run an errand, mail something at the post box down the street, to that actually helps them to feel less anxious in their general life because they have this internal sense of I can do things.
Yeah.
And I could be a little intimidated the first time I walk to Center for the Living Arts. But by the third time, I can do it. I've got 2 people I usually see on the way there that I think are kind of watching out for me. I mean, there's so many cool things one learns about themselves. Young people learn about themselves knowing they can do that sort of stuff. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I think it does help both build her self-confidence to allow some of that, and also just give her more confidence in knowing that people are not just like wandering around out to get you. Like, you might pass by people, but all you got to do is say hello and keep walking, you know?
Yeah.
And that by and large, humans are good.
So, and that really gets at our core beliefs as humans. You know, she can have a belief about herself that I can do things, I am capable, and about others that generally the world is safe, people are safe. And obviously bad things can happen and someone's worldview can be turned upside down.
Yeah.
But in general, she's growing up with this worldview that I'm not alone.
Yep.
I'm generally safe and surrounded by safe people. You know, if my spidey senses go off, I listen to that and I know what to do. That's really, really awesome to hear. And coming from Sherrard and your husband coming from Moline and moving into the downtown of Rock Island, did you have your own thoughts before moving that it might be a certain way, which it sounds like have been not confirmed, or did you guys not really know that much about Rock Island?
I think it would be fair to say that my husband knew more than I did just because he grew up here. I think that, you know, at the time that we lived in downtown, like in the actual corridor of the district, in those lofts, that was back when there were bars everywhere. And, you know, we were young and participated in all of that fun nightlife as well. That's part of the reason why we loved living down here at that age. I can't say that I have ever been concerned in the way that maybe other people have been about the way that Rock Islanders are or the way that our city is. I don't know if that's just because my worldview isn't that. I don't see the same risks I think other people do sometimes, and that's in part because I've had a lot of exposure through my work in homeless services. But also, we haven't had anything bad happen to us here, and we've lived here for a long time. We've had way more good things happen than anything scary or bad. So we've had a lot of evidence over the years that, you know, we're safe in Rock Island. Even when, you know, the bars would let out at 2 a.m. and maybe, you know, we'd be working at the theater late or something, I would still walk from the theater back to our apartment by myself, aware of my surroundings and not an idiot. I'm not head down in my phone, for example, or walking with a bag of cash around. But by and large, again, I think Rock Island's got a good spirit, and I think you feel that more than anything else if you live here.
What are some of your favorite parts of Rock Island? Different restaurants or just spots to be, or, you know, we talked about the Center for the Living Arts, but in addition to that, what else do you enjoy?
One of my more recent discoveries that I wish I had more time to take advantage of is the Friday nights at Hauberg. The fact that they have turned that amazing carriage house into this adorable little bar on Friday nights, and you can just sort of hang out with the community up there and appreciate that space. I think that is quite a hidden gem in Rock Island as well. We love huckleberries. We will consume huckleberries as often as humanly possible, and I love that. I also love Holy Grinds Coffee Shop. I think that we have so many cool little nooks and crannies around Rock Island that are special and unique. And I also really love our public school system. My daughter has just started attending Washington.
Same. Our girls are going to be at Washington together in 7th grade. Yep.
And, you know, the transition to junior high is hard, probably no matter who you are or what school you're going to. But by and large, just have been really impressed with the education system here, which was important to us as well. There's a million things I love about Rock Island. It's why we bought a house. We've bought 2 houses here and plan to stay in the one we're in probably forever.
What about things you wish we had that are missing? Any services or amenities or something you wish, like Mayor Harris says, things you don't have to go to the moon for?
Yeah.
And what do we need more of in our community?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of the work that the West End Revitalization Group is doing is going to probably highlight a lot of that's missing. But I think things like food deserts are a real problem down here. I know my family goes frequently to the Dollar General Market. That's also within walking distance of our house too. And while that has been great, because I do see so many people in there purchasing groceries and other needed supplies, it's not sufficient, and it's not what other people get in other areas of the city. So I think having more grocery stores is an important thing. I think downtown here, where I spend the majority of my time, I really want to see more local folks investing in small businesses down here. I miss Theo's. We miss the Blue Cat. Things that are third places for our community are super, super important. I think that's what the Center of Living Arts is for a lot of our kids. It's a third place. It's theater, but that's also where people go to feel seen and heard and valued in a really profound way. And I think we need more of that, more inclusive places that aren't so expensive.
Yeah.
Even if you want to go right now and get a beer somewhere, you still have to have means to do that. So I think adding more community gathering things is an important part of that's missing in our community. And then, infrastructure, working in homeless services as long as I have, there will never be enough bus routes or buses or the time of buses that I know is so dictated by a lot of state and federal dollars. But that gives people access to things. And if you don't have that, then they just simply don't have access to the same things the rest of us do. So an increase in better busing and public transportation, I think, is something Rock Island really needs. Yeah.
Yeah. And that might be a nice segue into, why I really wanted to talk to you today, because there's been a little controversy in the community.
Yes.
Of late. There, for those who aren't aware, you are co-founding something called The Third Place.
Yes.
And it might be helpful to just give a little background on what is The Third Place, and maybe even your background too. Like, how do
Sure.
you come to this role? What's your previous experience and kind of the sector you've been working in? But would you mind giving us a little background on The Third Place?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what The Third Place is first, which is a drop-in center for people who are living unsheltered. At its core, we are going to be open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we are going to provide some of the things that people don't have access to now. So things like a place to securely store your belongings, so that you don't have to carry them around with you all day. We're going to offer charging stations for cell phones or other devices. We're going to offer restrooms that will be open during that time frame. Right now in downtown Rock Island, occasionally Schwiebert Park is open, and if you're unsheltered, you can utilize the restroom there. But otherwise, you're probably poking around at businesses or other places to try to find a restroom. So we'll have public bathrooms. We are also obviously air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter, and will provide safety in that way for people who are accessing The Third Place. We're also going to let people utilize our mailing address. It's something that if you haven't ever been unsheltered, you don't think about, but if you don't have a mailing address, you're not getting a food assistance card, you're not getting Medicaid, you're not doing really anything because you can't receive mail anywhere. So, and usually if you're staying at a shelter, they'll allow you to use their mailing address, but this will be more designed for people who aren't actively staying at shelters. We're going to offer laundry so that people can wash their clothes. Something that's kind of happening now a lot is people who are unsheltered have no place to do their laundry. So when those those clothes get soiled or can no longer be worn because they're too dirty, what do? Well, you almost have to throw them away and get a new set of clothes because what else are you going to do? So things like that really meet basic need type things for people. In addition to that, we're going to have other nonprofit providers in the space to connect people to the services that they need. Organizations like Christian Care, Robert Young, once we have those conversations, community health care, we're hoping will come in, the outreach workers in this area, to try to get people connected to the services that can help support them on their journey out of homelessness. The one thing that will make the Third Place unique to sort of the drop-in model is that we aren't going to require any of those things. And that is because we really believe that people need a space to be without constantly being treated like a case or a problem or a person to move along. And that by creating that environment with them, they'll be more likely to access services. When they feel safe and seen in a space over time, their barriers will fall and they will be more willing to engage in supportive services. We're filling this gap. So we're not an overnight shelter. We are not providing street outreach services. We are going to be the location for people to utilize during the daytime hours, which right now in our community, we have some places that function a little similarly, but not a true drop-in center. So that is what the Third Place is going to do. We're located at 2000 3rd Avenue down here in downtown Rock Island. And
So I'm at 1810, so
Yeah.
we would be neighbors. So you would
We're
just
neighbors.
be 2 blocks to the east.
we could stick our heads out and wave to each other.
Okay.
Yeah, we could.
So you're on the other side of Circa 21. Is that where you would be?
On the other, so directions are hard for me.
I know, me too.
Fort Armstrong's got that big, beautiful green space.
Yeah.
We're across the street from that.
Okay, so one more block that way.
One more block.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my background, I worked in homeless services since I was a child. I was not, but I volunteered at Humility Homes and Services when I was a student at Augustana, just because my advisor told me that I hadn't really done anything to warrant somebody wanting to hire me after I graduated. So, and I fell in love with the work and found a lot of value in it. Really feel like it's something that as a community, if we aren't providing people shelter, if we are failing at that, we can't possibly be doing really well at everything else. So I really do have a passion for it. And mostly I love the people. I love getting to know people. My co-founder, Chloe, and I both worked together in homeless services for several years and then followed each other actually into disability services for a few years. And that's kind of where this idea came from.
So you have been raised in this issue of homelessness, working with people who are unhoused.
Yeah.
A lot of exposure to maybe some of the underlying causes of that, like a lack of affordable housing or kind of disability actually can be a big part of why people can't maintain paying bills. And so it sounds like identified this Third Place concept as maybe a gap in service. We have a shelter, we have other types of services, but that a third place, a safe place where people can do laundry, charge their cell phones, store some belongings, receive mail, that is really critical to people recovering from their circumstances. If you have to leave your shelter and take everything with you, your day is kind of filled with keeping track of your stuff. Your cell phone dies. You can't make calls that you need to make. You're wearing clothes that you can't wash. It's like hard to get that momentum to get out of homelessness if that is your reality. And there has been controversy, though, surrounding this.
Yes.
And
there has been.
Yes. So do you mind providing a little bit of the background? Like, because I think you had a space, you had talked to some city people, you were kind of, the ball was in motion to open this whole thing. And then what happened?
Yeah. So we incorporated as a nonprofit last year towards the end of the year and formed a board and started having those meetings. Did some research into trying to decide the best location for the third place, and that took several months. Kind of looking again at evaluating what services were already in the community and having some of those conversations with other service providers about what they were doing and what they weren't doing and what they thought was needed, and ultimately decided on Rock Island. And also, we always kind of wanted to be in Rock Island anyway. This was where I saw the gap in services because I live here, because I'm walking this community every day. Mm-hmm. So it was both evidence-based, the data supported it, and I had sort of the anecdotal part because I live down here. Worked with a realtor for a long time to try to secure a building down here, ran into quite a few roadblocks, which could probably be another episode of a podcast at some point.
Let's do it.
And yeah.
Just to pause on that really quick, what do you mean? Like there just wasn't availability, the existing stock was overpriced, it was...
All of that, okay. And some other things.
Well, we'll put a pin in it, but...
Yeah, so a little bit of that. A little bit of, there's a lot of vacancies, but not a lot of buildings actually have for sale or for lease signs on them. So some of the buildings that I was interested in, it was like private investigator work to figure out who owned it, what their interest was in either leasing it or selling it. We also are... because of the services that we're providing, I think we also kind of got blacklisted from some buildings down here, and that put some roadblocks up. So it was kind of a combination of things. And yeah, also some higher than I expected leasing amounts on buildings down here, because obviously there are a lot of vacancies down here right now. I very ignorantly, I think, thought it would be easier to find a building than it was, but we're where we are now, and it'll be perfect for us as we get started. So, okay, so where were we at?
So you found a place.
So we found a place.
You created the nonprofit. You're probably starting to do, I'm guessing, like fundraising and...
Yep. Had our first fundraiser, public fundraiser at Icons downtown, and that went really well. Had created all of the necessary paperwork and everything that we needed, all of getting incorporated and all of our board bylaws and all of that really boring stuff. Had started to have conversations with the city, had a conversation with the outgoing mayor, had met with our alderperson, several other folks. I shared this with somebody at the city today. There's not like a place on the city's website where you click on it, like want to start a new nonprofit, and then it kind of walks you through all of the different things that you're supposed to be doing or should be doing. And I think it would be great if the city had something like that at some point. And so we had, started work on the building. We had gotten very close to actually meeting our fundraising goal to get our doors open. And a couple of Mondays ago, out of nowhere, got a phone call on the day of this moratorium vote that the city wanted to implement a 4-month pause on not all social services, but all social services as they sort of relate to, I would say, homelessness or housing instability, and maybe even some poverty just related services too, because of like food pantries being included. And didn't really know why that had happened or how that had happened, but it would have kicked we're supposed to open on October 1st. It would have kicked our opening date back to at least November 25th, which was when the moratorium was going to expire.
And who called you?
I got a phone call from another nonprofit at the actually exact same time that the media called us. So it was kind of both. And yeah, we were really shocked as a resident of Rock Island for as long as I have been, and just as much as my kind of extended family has been in and around doing things down here. I guess I just assumed that if something was going to go in front of city council, that would fundamentally alter not just our opening date, but really all of our plans, because
it's a threat to the existence of your organization and some.
Yeah. I mean, we we had a project timeline to get ourselves open by October 1st. And so when we are doing things like communicating with the public or applying for grants with funders, we're indicating that that's our open date. And so a lot of our funding could have been at risk.
And it's not a secret that you're doing this. You've met with your alderperson. You've met with the city. People know that you're doing this.
Yeah. We want everybody to know.
Yes. It's out there.
It's out there. So we kind of tried to figure out what was going on that day before the city council meeting. And we rallied some support to show up to that city council meeting. Honestly, there were so many people there that the third place hadn't even known yet, but they had heard of us and heard that this vote was going to happen and were very concerned about what that meant for Rock Island. And
so
I
think that would have been the July 28th city council meeting, and people, if they're interested, can go watch the meetings on YouTube if you go to the city's website, and you could listen to the Nest came out, Project Now, Tapestry Farms. I mean, there were just a lot of people that came out to kind of say, whoa. Yeah. What's this all about?
Yeah. And so we had I would say a lot of public support at that meeting, and the city council ultimately decided to postpone the vote until August 25th. So that is when the next vote will occur for the moratorium. And so immediately after that day, I would say, is when we, my board and Chloe and I really had to get very intentional about understanding what these concerns were, what the community's concerns really were, and how we kind of stepped on a hornet's nest, so to speak.
So there was some history that preceded anything with the third place. There was some history going on in the city between the interests of taking care of human beings and some business interests. And so you guys you kind of stepped into it because there was some drama going on prior to you putting this out there that it's kind of complicated.
Yeah, and it was also kind of confusing for me initially, although I've had a lot of conversations since then that I think have really helped me understand more of what the concerns have been. But it was confusing to me initially because we're not a shelter, and in some ways shelters can draw people to an area, because if you can't access the shelter in Davenport and you need a place to sleep tonight, of course you're going to go across the bridge because you don't want to sleep outside if you don't have to. So I do think in some ways shelters can, quote unquote, draw people, although I'd be very hesitant to say that is the only thing that occurs. In Rock Island's case, I think 3 things happened all at once that nobody was prepared for. The winter shelter that had been in Davenport for over a decade moved and opened in downtown Rock Island. At the same time...
So is that King's Harvest?
So for the longest period of time, it was King's Harvest. They operated it.
Maybe it would be helpful for listeners who aren't as familiar. For the last decade, what has the kind of geography and operation of locally homeless shelters been in our area?
So specifically as it relates to the winter shelter, King's Harvest and their director, Terry, ran that with volunteers for, I think it was at least a decade or close to a decade. And I still say this anytime I get a chance. I feel like the community should give them some sort of award, because the fact that they were able to pull that off with some of the people who struggle the most in our community and safely run that for as long as they did with volunteers primarily. They had some paid staff, but it was mostly volunteers, is just incredible. And then one year, they couldn't rally the support, basically. It was going to be too costly for them to do some things to the building, and they just had kind of ran out of their pool of volunteers.
So that was one stable shelter in the community that had been there for a long time.
Yeah, and opened just in the winter months. They had some other sheltering services year round, but it was in particular to a shelter that opened in our community, usually opened on December 1st and closed on April 15th every year. just to provide life-saving services for people so they don't freeze to death, because you can very easily freeze to death in one night sleeping outside in, negative 40 degrees like we've had.
Not even, I don't think it has to be that cold.
It can certainly be less cold than that.
So that is that special kind of winter shelter situation. But then in the broader Quad City community, I'm just curious, how many shelters operate either then or now? How many overnight shelters do we have? Do you know?
So forgive me if I forget anybody, whoever's listening, but we have Humility Homes and Services, which operates the largest low barrier shelter in our community, which means that they really accept all people into their services without much criteria to enter.
And are they in Davenport?
They are in Davenport. Yes. The Salvation Army operates a family shelter. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that they are operating that out of hotels, which is another common model for sheltering, especially with families. Family Resources does domestic violence services and sheltering through that. Christian Care operates a program in Rock Island, a couple blocks from where the third place will be. I think they have over a 40-bed shelter, and then they also, for men, and then they also have a grant per diem program that serves veterans as well. Humility has that program too. And Christian Care also operates a women and children shelter here in Rock Island.
Anything in Moline, East Moline, Bettendorf that you can think of?
No, there are no... unless one of the organizations that utilizes hotels for sheltering are sheltering people there are no physical sort of brick and mortar shelters that I'm familiar with in those communities.
And the Christian Care Shelter in Rock Island is still open.
Yes.
Has been open.
Full all of the time.
So Davenport and Rock Island, it sounds like, in general, do the bulk of shelter services for the Quad Cities.
Yes.
And when the King's Harvest was going to be no more, maybe Rock Island, Davenport, maybe we have more robust infrastructure for social services already.
Yeah.
So there was this fear at that time that this shelter is going to close, and on December 1st, so many people won't have that emergency overnight cold weather shelter.
Right.
And so none of this has anything to do with you per se. You weren't involved in this.
No.
Predated you.
Yeah.
But then my understanding is Project Now, with help from the city of Rock Island and funding, decided to open to take the place of, or kind of fill that gap, an overnight winter shelter in Rock Island. And that's maybe where some of this drama is stemming from.
Yeah.
And so what happened there? Have you since learned, what was that story? And
yeah, so just to rewind a little bit, after King's Harvest had it for 10 years, Humility did take it over for 5 or 6 years after that.
Oh, okay.
And so it was actually Humility that opened up additional capacity in 2 different ways. A few years, they actually staffed it and ran it out of King's Harvest. And then for the last several years, they had done a bunch of renovations to the basement and had increased the capacity in their actual physical shelter that's open year round. And kind of in the planning of where the winter shelter was going to be and what was going to happen during those 5 years, we also have to remember the pandemic happened. And that, amongst everything else in our lives, but specifically in terms of homelessness and homeless services, the pandemic completely changed everything for us. And so Humility kind of operated that winter overflow shelter during the pandemic as well. But yes, then this year they stopped operating it, and Project Now picked up the helm and opened it in their old building in downtown Rock Island.
And is the building where they had it basically across the street from the downtown Rock Island Library?
Directly across the street, yep.
Okay, and so that became life-saving for so many people.
Yeah.
People probably would have died without...
Yes.
I don't think that's hyperbolic to say.
No, it's not. It's not.
And it happened pretty quickly. It was kind of a response to... an emerging situation.
Yep.
And it seemed like perhaps the Rock Island downtown community didn't quite have time to gear up for that, or enough of a heads up. Or I'm a nerd and I watch all the city council stuff. And so I watched the study session last week with Project Now.
Oh, yeah.
And so they kind of outlined really all the incredible work that shelter did to keep people safe, to get, I think 18 people ended up being housed as a result of that program. No persons lost their lives in the cold. So there were really good outcomes for the people it served. But it sounds like because of the timing of it and they really tried to convert that building quickly to accommodate. Some of the surrounding business owners felt a little bit caught off guard with what they had to maybe absorb or be prepared for. And I think you bring up such a great point about the pandemic, because just as it changed social services, and I think you guys probably felt this in your small business, the business owners downtown were exhausted from the closing of or having to kind of try to keep their businesses running during the pandemic. Then they did the downtown revitalization, so the roads are torn up. I mean, business owners down here have been through it.
Yep.
And, kind of all these things that keep happening to them that are outside of their control. And so it was really this like perfect storm for conflict. And really unfortunate. But am I summarizing that right? Or
yeah, I think that is kind of a great summary. And I think that and obviously, again, I wasn't involved in this, but just from my perception and knowing the importance of a winter shelter in a community like ours, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want people to not die on the streets. I mean, none of us want that. Nobody who is even struggling with the challenges that people in an urban area experiencing homelessness can bring with them want that to happen. I just think that this particular situation happened quickly and happened with as much planning as Project Now could possibly do in a short time frame. And I give them a lot of credit for opening it. Winter shelters, I ran one for several years. They are difficult. They are a difficult program to operate. You're challenged in that way. And
I think they said the youngest person in shelter was 6 months old, and the oldest was like 72. So you're taking care of babies, senior citizens, men, women, families. I mean, it just really ran the gamut. That has to be so challenging.
Yeah. And so, the community wasn't really prepared for it. There probably weren't enough community conversations. That's something I've learned through this whole process, is that there's really no such thing as having told enough people about what you're doing. And it's not enough to post it on your Facebook and feel like you've educated people, or we need to go talk to people face to face, and we need to sit down with our neighbors and talk to them about what their concerns are and really hear them, because they are valid. They just cannot be the only voice we're listening to, or in my opinion, the loudest, because at the end of the day, the people who are living unsheltered are the ones that are the most vulnerable in our community and deserve to have their voices amplified the loudest.
Well, and I didn't know you. We'd never met, but I'd reached out to say, let's do some community therapy. And it didn't really work out, but
we had high hopes.
I did this extensive training in something called internal family systems. And I wrote a really nerdy article about it on my website. No one's read it, but the idea is that within each of us, we have parts, and we have these complex systems as an individual. And so there might be a part of me that is highly motivated to manage my environment. Maybe I have kind of a perfectionist part that is like, okay, I'm going to stay really organized, and I'm going to be on top of everything, and I won't let anything slip. And you could almost imagine that part with its own age and outfit and the way it, but I might have this other part of me that is very exhausted by that. And so, toward the end of the day, that managing part starts to get tired, and this other part comes up to say, now I can't do anything. A really like part of me that's like, I just want to lay here and doom scroll. And so that's a silly kind of example, but this internal family systems therapy posits that we have these parts of ourselves. Some are called managers. They're trying to preemptively make sure that everything is okay. And then we have what are called firefighters, and they kind of come up after the exhaustion, the loneliness, the sadness has come up to kind of try to make the feelings go away. For some people, that might be substance abuse. It might be taking a nap. It's anything you do to just cope with those overwhelming feelings. So in all of our individual systems, we have these parts, and often they're protecting what are called exiles, which are just difficult emotional states like sadness, despair, feeling unworthy. And so in order to protect those exiled emotions, they pop up to just manage the system. And when they're pushed out into their extreme forms, you can have what's called a polarization between parts, where it's like one part, the perfectionist part, is leaning so far out this side of the boat. In order to keep balance, the kind of, part that's maybe dissociated or just kind of turned off can't be that perfect, so it goes hard the other way, is leaning out the other side of the boat. And the self energy in the middle, which is what we aspire to be, self-led. It's like when you feel curious and calm and connected, you can communicate, you can, that kind of gets lost in the middle of it. And so there is group IFS, but I have this idea in Rock Island that we could do community IFS work.
Yeah.
And in community IFS work, which I was hoping we could do, but it's like, who's going to volunteer to do community therapy? I don't know.
Yeah.
But you really look at the
We
parts.
have to bribe them, maybe.
Yes.
That should be our tactic.
Well, John from Huckleberries was willing to
Yes,
let
he
us
was.
use the space, and we could have given some Huckleberries pizza. And,
yeah.
But it's kind of this recognition that there are parts of a community. And so you have, if I think about your part, maybe I even visualize it as you, and you kind of get to know parts with curiosity and compassion. And so I'm getting to know your part, and it is mission driven. It very much wants to take care of people, wants to save lives, wants to help people recover, wants to help people be housed. And so you can kind of get a sense of its job and its motivation. And similarly, in a community, you can get to know and be curious about a business owner. And the thing that shocks me about all Rock Islanders is just what you said, the Rock Island spirit.
Yeah.
So I think every business owner I've ever talked to in Rock Island has the part of them that is loving and concerned about humans. And, I'm sure as you've met with business owners, that's like seems to be there for most Rock Islanders.
Yes.
So there's that part of them that is like, I want to take care of people, I want to love people. But in their business part that might be activated, especially if they're feeling out of control or that they've lost agency over their livelihood, kind of the more high the stakes are, the more our parts become extreme. I imagine if I put in this other chair someone to just represent that part. And this is what we were hoping to do in this gathering together. But to get to know it with curiosity and compassion, it might be, I'm afraid that I will go out of business and I won't be able to pay my bills.
Yep.
I'm afraid that a situation will arise within my business that I won't have the capacity to handle and it'll be out of control.
Yep.
I'm exhausted. I'm so exhausted from the street work and the pandemic and just ongoing issues of running a business. I just can't put one more thing on my plate.
Yep.
And so in an individual system, I'm so rambling, but like IFS was really developed for disordered eating because you have these parts, one is binging and one is restricting and they can't talk to each other. And, the restrictor comes up with a plan and is like, this is what we're doing now, but doesn't pause to check in with the other parts that are like, yeah, I'm not on board with that. And so similarly in a city, as things are moving forward, I think you're really speaking to permission seeking from parts of a community and that dialogue of together we're kind of this organism that's like living and breathing and changing. And if one part tries to just move forward without checking in with the other parts that create balance, the system can have this backlash. And it feels like that's what happened. It's like, because when you talk to the business owners, they're such lovely, loving humans, but parts of them might have been activated of, I'm alone, no one cares about me, I won't be cared for, sorry, that's really rambly, but does that make sense? Does that system make sense?
Yeah, and I do think it is a good depiction of what has happened over the last several months that led to someone making the decision to have the city council put forward this moratorium. Like I said, in all of the conversations that I've had with downtown business owners since then, we've come to an understanding specifically about the third place and what the third place is going to provide the community, the ways that it will be helpful, and also really heard some of the very serious concerns that people are having. My husband sometimes reminds me, Christie, not everybody is going to be like you. You are how you are because you have had so much experience talking to different people. But, if you haven't had that and therefore don't see people through that lens, we need to help get you there. It's not okay to still have stigma about people, but it is the reality. Mm-hmm. And some business owners have had honestly scary things happen, and we can't pretend like that's not valid either, because that's not going to help anything. At the end of the day, we're all going to coexist down here because, unfortunately, the third place or not, people experiencing homelessness are on the rise. This is not a problem that is unique to Rock Island. All communities are struggling with this conversation. We have so many systemic problems that even within our communities are really difficult to get ahead of, to be able to sort of make a dent in the amount of people entering the system, that we do also have to acknowledge that there is no social service agency that's going to have all the answers either, or be able to address all of the concerns that come along with people who may be experiencing homelessness. Right. But that doesn't mean that we don't try or have those community conversations together. And the third place is all about building community. And one of the things that I have learned through this is that it has given me an avenue to build more of my own community, because I've sort of inadvertently been forced to go out and speak to people that maybe don't think the same way that I do, or have some, might not be super thrilled that there's another service coming to downtown Rock Island, but yet we can sit and drink a pop together and mm-hmm. chit chat about our kids and understand that both things can exist. We can all exist down here together.
I feel like that is the whole thing that humanity is trying to do right now. And I always think about Rock Island as being this microcosm of the United States. So mm-hmm. if Illinois, I read an article that Illinois is the most American state if you looked at the demography of the entire country and the breakdown of diversity.
Interesting.
Illinois is the most America of America.
Yeah.
And then you think about Rock Island with the diversity of our school district. And
yes.
So we're almost this microcosm of the entire country.
Yeah.
And what it would take to address problems. And I think what you are tapping into in the model that I would like to propose is this idea of self-energy, this community energy or soul-led self, where mm-hmm. you can sit across from someone and you're in self-energy when you can feel curious about them. You can feel creative about what solutions we could come up with. Mm-hmm. You can feel compassion for their perspective, even if you don't ultimately think it's the way to go.
Right.
Where you can start to kind of open yourself up to seeing another human being in front of you.
Yeah.
And also recognizing, though, that there's a part of you, especially in this role, that is really, driven to care for people.
Yeah.
And that's your whole world.
Yeah.
I'm a storyteller. I feel like my part is I can get very, so in this model, it's called a U-turn, where you try to be exploratory about yourself, So for me, I can see victim, oppressor, and I'm a helper, and it's, no one's even asked me to help. I'm just, and it sometimes is a problem because I can get extreme in that, where it's nobody asked you to help, sit down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
you're doing this to yourself.
Right. And a business owner also has a part in their professional life when they're trying to come out and do their business. They've got bills to pay, they're in that. But we have these moments when you sit across from someone where those parts can relax a little bit mm-hmm. and we can be connected to someone. And I think that helps us come up with more sustainable, creative solutions, because just as the country is grappling with how to do this in Rock Island, we have to stay connected.
Mm-hmm.
and we need solutions that will actually work.
Mm-hmm.
So, just some context, I think in Illinois, and tell me if I'm wrong because you probably know this, homelessness has gone up over 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And in Rock Island County, by about 45% since 23.
Yeah, those are close. Yep.
Okay, somewhere in there.
Yep.
With changes coming in a couple years to food security benefits, to health insurance, that we are expecting that our populations who are struggling more with poverty, and that the problem's probably going to get worse from a national level. Those supports will decrease, not increase. And if we look at the city of Rock Island, I just saw something that the West End Revitalization put out, that in the ward around the West End Revitalization Project, the poverty rate is like over 40% of residents live in poverty. So, and then we've got the juxtaposition of the president of the United States this week saying they're just going to take all the homeless people off the street and put them somewhere.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
And in this model, almost like these issues we struggle with at a societal level, are kind of the exiles. They're the pain of our system, the things that hurt, that aren't working, and we're not sure how to make better. So it could be something like illiteracy or violence, child abuse, homelessness, poverty. And the solution can't be just don't look at it, because where do those humans go? But also, as a Rock Islander, I get this, and I don't know if this is a part of me, so I'm just going to share it with you, and it might sound bad. I don't know.
I'm ready.
But also, like, how do we engage the entire Quad Cities? Because sometimes as a Rock Islander, I feel like people have such a good spirit.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, you guys like take care of the environment, take care of the eagles, take care of the turtles. And I'm like, I want to take care of people who live in poverty and everyone who's homeless. And like the other communities are like, and we're just going to work on economic development and keep everyone out who doesn't. Is that too extreme? And I want to live here. I want to take care of everyone. And, and this idea that we need a regional approach is, to me, it's also like we do need a regional approach. And
and there is, like, I think sometimes too, there is that work happening. It's just happening maybe in a way that isn't very obvious to everybody. I don't think that there's anything bad about what you said. I laugh because I worked in these services my whole career in Iowa, and all we ever heard on that side was the same thing that now Rock Island is saying on this side. So, why are we taking care of the problem? And, and truthfully, like specifically as it relates to the winter shelter, this is the first year that any other city has done anything than Davenport. So, we can say what we want to say about Rock Island taking on the whole burden, but we also need to be really honest about what that is that true, I do think that there are so many layers to that are complicated. I will say one thing from a nonprofit provider's perspective that is hard in that conversation is that sometimes we're looked at as needing to have that solution, how to get buy-in from municipalities or cities into projects that we're doing. I've been told by city officials, why don't you do it in Moline? Why are you doing it here? Those types of things. I feel like our leaders in city government are the ones that need to get the buy-in from the other municipalities. But you also have to provide the buy-in first. So, I think there's a lot of layers to that. I had a great conversation today with a city staffer who, explained to me that it can be hard for Rock Island because we are struggling economically.
Well, we have the highest poverty rate. We have the highest rate of, immigrants and refugees who actually help our community financially. Yeah. But there's different language services that are required.
Yep.
We just have we have less money.
Yeah, we have less money to do things. And so that is where a more regional approach would be much more effective to the community overall. I laugh as well because in a lot of the Quad Cities marketing, it's like, we're the Quad Cities. We're all one big happy family. Like, this is a bi-state region. And then you drill down to issues like this, and very quickly it's like
crickets.
What's in Davenport should stay in Davenport, and what's in Rock Island should stay in Rock Island. And, as it relates to people experiencing homelessness, you can get into a whole philosophical argument about, is that person from Davenport or is that person from Rock Island? How are you recording their last permanent address or last night of residence, and how do you then decide which set of taxpayers is responsible for caring for that person? I mean, you can get into a whole other slew of issues with that, but the reality is the river's always going to be there. We're always going to be kind of one community that either thrives together or doesn't. I think having a more regional approach to homeless services is really important. And I think it's things like the Quad City Housing Council are already doing. I think if more city governments got around that table regularly, they would see that there is a lot of collaboration across the river. And that's also where, in terms of services related to housing, a lot of those like gaps are being identified, as well as how to fill those gaps and what is needed in our community related to homeless services. So some of it, I think, is also people taking advantage of the infrastructure that is already in existence and capitalizing on that to create more of a regional approach. And I just would never say, I could never say enough how important the Quad City Housing Council is to that conversation. They are the convener. They are the recipient of the State Housing Trust Fund dollars. They've also done all of the research and background to understand sort of the whole landscape of the Quad Cities.
So we already have some infrastructure where these conversations can take place, and we can hopefully move toward a regional approach. And that's the final part of what that IFS thing, and what I was starting to feel in my own body is this, like, I have a strong manager that's like, how do we take care of everyone? How do we take care of everyone?
Yeah.
And when it starts to get exhausted, it can feel like it's going to overwhelm me. I can't do it. And so you're trying to recognize in your body or in your system, what's going on for you. And then the some of the final questions in that model are, what would you need to know to not have to work so hard? Whether it's your managing part or the part that's like, I just need to bury my head in the sand because I'm overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. The manager gets overwhelmed, and then it's like, I can't be engaged. I can't look. I can't see. And I think for Rock Island, if I think of it as a system, it needs to know that there's some regional support or help coming, or that we're all in this together in the same way that we are, as you said, for business, alternating currents, all that stuff. It's like, we love each other. We're all together.
We love each other.
But in the same way that we take care of human beings who are suffering and struggling and will continue to do so and aren't going anywhere.
Yeah,
and you can't
not.
hide them away, and you shouldn't. And
they're wonderful, amazing human beings. And I know that that's the loudest part of my parts, is the part that just wants to scream that every chance I get. Everyone's life who engages with people in the way that I get to every day goes home and not only feels remarkably grateful for what I have in my life, which is something I feel like you don't get like I do every day. I feel so lucky that I get that I get to feel such gratitude for what I have in my life because of what I do every day for my job. But secondarily to that, I am smarter, I am funnier, I am more enriched, I know more things about life. I feel safer in my community because I take the time to talk to these folks who are just like us, who have senses of humor, who have preferences for things, who, don't just want to take, but want to give. Like I had a can of coffee in the Third Place the other day. And we're not open yet, but people kind of know, right? I mean, they either know me from the work that I've done forever, or they found their way there and can see that we have some supplies and, look for help. And I had somebody come in and see me the other day who just wanted this jar of peanut butter that I had. on my table, and he had a bag of some other stuff and it had coffee in it, and we're going to serve coffee. And he offered, he was like, could I trade you that jar of peanut butter and that thing of graham crackers for that coffee? Because I want that coffee. And I was like, yes, like that is how we work together as a community. Like people who are unsheltered want purpose too.
Yeah, and if you hear the stories of the business owners down here, because I've gone around and tried to like interview people, including folks who are unhoused. And you will hear a lot of business owners say that there are deep relationships with people who are unhoused. Mm-hmm. And maybe someone needs a pair of pants. And so it's like, here's a pair of pants, but that guy will come back, you know, the next day or a week later with the $10 for the pair of pants. Or be cleaning. A guy told me a story about an unhoused man who was cleaning garbage cans in the alleys, like trying to clean up the area and make it better. And I met a guy who his spiral with his housing really began when his dog passed away. It was his main connection. And he went into a deep depression when his animal died and then lost his housing, got into a bad situation where really it sounds like he was financially kind of taken advantage of because he had like some sort of a veterans check, or I don't know. But, you know, when you do start to get to know people, hear their stories, and also hear the connections that Center for the Living Arts, for example, there was a guy who would always come in during rehearsals when it was really cold and sit kind of on a bucket, never bothered anyone. Everyone kind of expected he would be there, you know, and you kind of get to know people. And so some things I hear or I'm sensing from business owners is like, what if customers are scared away? What if people reject my business? But I was talking to this guy who works at the hair salon, and he was saying, like, none of us worry about any of the unhoused people who work here, but sometimes our customers do. And so I was like, could Rock Island make like little cards or things to hand out to consumers to say, you know, Rock Island is a so-and-so community. And here are some things to keep in mind when interacting with folks who are unhoused. Or could there be little signs in business windows or
yes to all of that. I think all of those things. I think like when I gave my very impassioned speech to City Council on the night of the moratorium, I did say, like, let's do something that your community can be proud of, you know, where we can really feel like we are both addressing the challenges that come along with it and doing the right thing by supporting our neighbors who are in this desperate need. And I think doing things like that is a wonderful idea. The Third Place hopes to create cards specific to the Third Place, maybe ones that say something along the lines of, or we can curate them for individual businesses based on what they need, that say something along the lines of like, you know, unfortunately, we don't provide public restrooms here. However, we have a place down the street that you can go and access right now, you know, so that you feel like you have some. It's so hard when you engage with somebody who is maybe not in the right place at the right time or doing something that is disruptive to the other good things going on. And you don't have any. What do? You don't have anywhere to send them. You can't just hand out money all the time. That's not a solution either. We have to do that as well. I think all of that's possible.
And that is something that really surprised me in the objection to the Third Place, because when even before you guys kind of came on the scene, having a building down here, doing things in the community, I think the number one concern I heard among business owners was about the bathrooms. Especially during those winter months. Well, I'd say it was two things. It was the bathrooms, but it was also new people that they didn't know. So when you're in a community, you know I already know the guys right around here. I talk to them, you know, so I kind of am familiar with the faces, and you kind of, as human beings, we're always sussing each other out. But it was lots of new faces. So people you don't know, and then the bathroom issue. So when the Third Place was brought up and there was opposition to it, I have to admit I was really shocked, because I'm like, wait, this is like the solution to the issues.
That's why we were so confused. Because I do, and I, you know, it is a solution. It's not just a solution because I say it's a solution either. Like, we didn't just pull a rabbit out of our hat and decide to open a drop-in center. These exist in all metropolitan areas. You will be hard-pressed to find a community with the population density that we have. You know, you're not going to find one in Sherrard. But you will find them you'll find them in Peoria, Shelter House in Iowa City has a version of one. The Central Iowa Shelter in Des Moines has one. I mean, Google drop-in centers, United States, and you can find 89,000 different models for this, because they do both work for the people who need them, but also they work to alleviate emergency service calls for quality of life issues that can otherwise be addressed simply with a location like a drop-in center. They reduce the general sense of this being an unsafe area because people have a place to go. They work. They're evidence-based. There's data to support that this will help alleviate the concerns in downtown Rock Island. And with full transparency, that is also only to the best of our capacity and our ability. Homelessness as a broader issue is going to continue to be a broader issue probably well into my lifetime.
Yeah.
We're not headed in the right direction. We're not seeing the numbers reduce. We're only seeing them increase.
Yeah.
So we will need, because our government is not providing those funding and resources anymore, nonprofits, philanthropic organizations and nonprofits are going to have to fill the gap. And that means that we're going to need new services. We're going to need more services. We don't have shelter bed coverage in this community either. We need more sheltering if we want to give everybody a place to go every night.
Was it something in that presentation like there's, I'm going to get all these numbers wrong, 450 people who need a bed and we only have 200?
Yeah, it was something like that. And that gap is, the projections at both the state and federal level is that number is just going to continue to grow. There's going to be more and more people unsheltered because at the end of the day, people just cannot afford life.
Well, market rate rent, they were saying in the presentation, is $200, or sorry, for a 2-bedroom is $1,000 market rate in Rock Island.
Yep.
And I'm doing all this work at Century Woods, and when someone is in there in low-income housing, they calculate your income, you pay a percentage. But let's say a woman there with one child gets a job at Amazon. So this happens all the time. She's now making $13 an hour. Her rent for a 2-bedroom at Century Woods will go up to like $1,400 a month to live in a house that has cockroaches and mold, dirty carpet. Like they're not keeping it up. And it's like, my husband and I live in a 6-bedroom house in a beautiful neighborhood in Rock Island. Our mortgage payment is under $1,000 a month. Yep. So the people who own homes and bought them at the right time and interest, it's like, how can a person living on the street afford more for an apartment than I and my husband and I are working full time? Like, right. I don't know, like the system is
the
so
math
broken.
Isn't mathing. Yes.
And even these like really shitty housing living conditions to pay over $1,000.
Yeah.
So our housing system and the cost of everything and inflation and then you've got rising costs of healthcare. A lot of people are going to get kicked off their healthcare and need to pay out of pocket for premiums if they want it, like food. Yeah. So, this is off on a tangent, but it's to your point, the pains, what I would call the exiles, exiled feelings, things we don't want to kind of acknowledge are there.
They're there.
And I think one of the reasons that there can be such animus toward people who are homeless is because they are this living, breathing, in-your-face reminder of the failures of your own society.
And not just the failures economically, because that is the largest and the reason. I mean, the only answer to homelessness is housing. Yeah. There's not some magic bullet. Everybody's always like asking questions about, what do you see the causes are? Of course, mental illness plays a role. Of course, substance use plays a role. However, by and large, there are far more people housed with severe mental illness and substance use disorders than there are unhoused. Again, the answer is still housing. It's always going to come back to housing. But in addition to that, we are also broken as communities. There are some cultures that you don't see homelessness in nearly as much because their own communities provide that. They won't allow somebody to fall all the way through the cracks in that way. But by and large, our communities are fractured, desperate, and not built to provide those safety nets for people. We have, that's kind of the third place's whole rub, right? We have less and less places for people to build community. We have less and less time because of capitalism to find the time to build. I mean, how many of us are scheduling? I just had a phone conversation with one of my closest friends last night that I've had at 8 p.m. that I've had on my calendar for several weeks. Like, I'm scheduling my own time for community. We're not just naturally engaging in it in the way that we are. We've gotten further spread apart. People are moving away from the homes that they were raised and grown up in, and all of that is contributing to the fabric of people falling through the cracks and ending up unsheltered too. You're stripped of your whole community for sure once you're experiencing homelessness. You don't have your neighbors anymore. You might not have the friendly gas station attendant who'd let you borrow a couple bucks. You sometimes lost your church. You've lost, and then it's really, really difficult, which most people who are housed can say, to rebuild community. How do you do it? Where are the places? How do we find each other in that way again? And
how do we provide mutual support for one another? That 60% of people in this country live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And so it's hard when you're running on your own hamster wheel to, look to your neighbor and say, they're having a hard time in this system
absolutely.
too. And it's not because we're bad or we're lazy or we're, all the reasons kind of people are blamed for their own economic struggle.
Right.
60% of people live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. And so, how do you have time to even connect with other people if your day is spent trying to figure out how to pay your water bill so your water doesn't get shut off tomorrow, but your car payments also do? But you just got done working 60 hours a week in a front-facing job. You're exhausted. Your kids need
It's a lot.
Things are a little broken.
So
things are a little broken.
And this would be an example of the when you look at the pain, you can see the parts rise up in yourself. That's like, how do we do this? How do we tackle it?
How do we do it?
And you can feel the part that's like, I give up.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this. I need to look away. I need to walk away.
Yeah.
You can feel that tension there. And I think one way we achieve that self-energy is by knowing we're not in it alone and approaching problems with that curiosity and creativity, and that all these different parts of a community could come together and how could Rock Island be with the issues that exist in the world and the country in a different way? So those little cards or something in the window or
coming together like this, hopefully with more voices and having those difficult conversations so that when you walk out of the door, that's what it's given me to talk to some of these business owners. I have all this tension because I'm concerned that they're going to say things to me that really concerned me or rub my values the wrong way, and that we're just going to be on opposite sides of the room screaming at each other. And then come to find out, nope, we're all trying our best and here, and you can leave just having this sense of we might not see eye to eye, but I can wave at you and feel safe around you and be able to kind of move on with my day in a way that I couldn't before.
And they're probably living paycheck to paycheck too,
Of course. Who isn't living paycheck to paycheck right now?
They're running small businesses in downtown Rock Island. These are mom and pop shops. They're not big corporations or anything. But so I do know one of the parts of this model would be, what do you need to know from the system, from the city, from the community to help you feel safe or to help you relax? And I think the one piece that I still am kind of I don't know. So when we think about a population of unhoused people, you've got maybe the most in the same way extreme example of what people think of, and it might be a person in the midst of a mental health crisis, or someone who has difficult behaviors, isn't wanting to really engage in a recovery model. They don't want to maybe stop using drugs.
Right.
They're not really engaged around their mental health.
Yeah.
Maybe they're in a larger body. And so they're more intimidating, or people are more fearful. And so there are some examples in the downtown area. I don't want to call anybody out, but there's perhaps a gentleman who might live in a building at times, and some of the females in that building feel scared. So, and there's not, when they identify the parts of their own body and how they activate, they have a right to feel, given their own histories, maybe bad things have happened to them. You know, they can't override that part that shows up of like, I'm afraid and this person's not supposed to be here. And I'm going to go into this bathroom by myself, and I don't like that, and it makes me feel unsafe. Or if someone was having a mental health crisis and it's the weekend, so, you know, the shelter's closed, you guys are closed, and this is going to happen whether you're there or not. So that's not the, but since you have some experience, so I think the business owners are like, what happens to us then? Because we're the ones who are here. You know, in these off-hour times, or if there is a problem, or our guests are trying to get to our establishment and there's someone who's having a lot of difficulty, I think that is really the missing and hardest piece is, what do we do there?
What do we do then? Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's your responsibility, but it is all of our responsibility.
Yeah. And I think that there are some actual things that can be done to help that. And I think there are also some just acknowledging that there might not always be an answer, and we're going to have to be okay with that too sometimes, because if there was always an answer, would we have the problems that we do now, right? We wouldn't. If it was as simple as, well, if someone's in the throes of a mental health crisis and maybe actively attending to voices in a loud and uncomfortable way, demonstrating that they could be a risk to themselves or others, then we should have some way in our system to get them the appropriate help. We don't. We don't. It's very difficult. I think that the things that we can do, specifically as nonprofit providers, and this has come a little bit out of the conversations that I've been having over the course of the last several weeks, is we need to continue to do, and maybe even do a better job of being very clear with the broader community about how our services operate and what it is we can and cannot do. Because when you have somebody like that who's in crisis, and then you have a lot of ambiguity around who can do what and when and how, that's complicating the problem as well and not helpful. So I think service providers being very clear. I'm actually going to hopefully work on something. We used to have this thing years ago in the social service world called a discharge matrix, which was designed actually, I think, through the Housing Council at some point, where it listed services, but beyond that, it also listed who could access those services, what hours, who the contact was, what barriers might be to getting into those services. And I think the community at large, especially like downtown, would really benefit from having a physical thing they can look at that says, call this person at this time, call this person at that time. You don't have anybody to call at this time, you know.
100%. I think that's a missing. I think that
it's a missing link.
Yeah, it's because that's that question in that model is, what do you need to know from the system to relax?
Yeah,
and it's like, give me a laminated piece of paper that tells me who to call when.
Yep.
So that when I see something happening and I don't feel like I can manage it.
Yeah.
Because I'm scared, or I just don't have the skills, or I'm trying to run my business. I don't have the time. Like, I just can't leave the griddle that I'm manning.
Yep.
What do I do?
Yeah. And what do I do?
I think because you guys aren't there and you don't need to be there. You have a business. You run it during certain hours. That's not, and you become a face of the social service, you know.
Yeah.
Giving people who aren't trained and haven't spent lifetimes dealing with all sorts of different people, people who are angry, people who are scared, giving business owners some sort of a matrix. I love that.
Yeah. I think it would just empower people to feel like they're actually doing something, rather than just like, okay, this is happening again, and my only option that I feel like I have is to call 911. And I know the outcome of that is going to be either they just do nothing because they can't, because sometimes 911 can't do anything either, or they're just going to move them along and they're going to be back.
And also, and maybe this won't sound right, but I'm in recovery. I've been sober for, I guess, like next week will be like 14 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I know sometimes substance abuse is a part of the problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and how critical it's been in my life for people to set boundaries with me.
Yep.
You know, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is say,
Yep.
you know, you can keep doing that, but I'm not going to be with you if you do that.
Yep.
Or so you think of a person who's abusing substances who maybe doesn't have housing because the people in their lives that love them have said, I love you so much, but you can't do this at my house anymore.
Yep.
I can't. And so there will be some people who don't really want to engage with services, who are having some behavior, you know, and I'm just wondering, like, as we're giving these guides and everything to the service providers, is there a kind way to also say to certain people who are engaged in drug use, or like also giving them a thing that, like, our community loves you, we want you to be healthy and well, but this isn't okay. Like, you are hurting the people around you with your behavior, and you can't do it here.
Yeah.
Like, we will be there for you 6 ways till Sunday.
Yeah.
And when you want help and support, go to the Third Place, go to Robert Young. And having those boundaries.
Yeah.
I think I'm specifically talking about alcoholism and drug use, and because there can be enabling of that too.
Yep.
And I used to live in Vancouver where they had like the clean injection sites.
Yep.
But like walking down that street where it was like hell. That's in different cities. I don't know how big of a problem that is in Rock Island.
Yeah.
But I'm just also wondering about the relationship of connection with a human who is unhoused, who is struggling with substance abuse. Being kind and loving toward people also isn't always, just keep doing what you're doing. You can do it right there. We won't bug you. You have the autonomy, and yes, you do. But like, also as another human being who's living right alongside you, that maybe that behavior is starting to impact me. I don't know how you have those conversations, because if it's just one-sided and I will keep taking care of you, you know, I don't know. I'm probably saying that in a really messed up way, but
no, it makes sense. And I think, again, like some actual things, I mean, first of all, just as somebody who has worked with people who are experiencing homelessness for a lot of years, I would never advise anybody to do anything that they didn't feel comfortable with, or they felt like their safety could be at jeopardy. And sometimes you don't know. Sometimes somebody might be engaging in loud screaming behavior and screaming at no one, but the things that they're saying are very disturbing, and that might make you feel unsafe, and you shouldn't feel like you have to go talk to that person. There are probably a lot of other times where that person isn't experiencing those symptoms, that if you are somebody who works down here or visits down here a lot, you might find a time to be able to say hi to them and introduce yourselves. I mean, the very simple things that I had somebody outside the Third Place this morning who I was inside with a contractor in my office, which is in the back corner, and I could hear them screaming out front. If I lived anywhere in the vicinity or worked anywhere in the vicinity, I would have been frightened. I knew who it was. I knew what was going on. I knew they were having a mental health crisis. I knew they were, but nobody else. I mean, most people wouldn't know that, right? And so I did kind of do what you just said. I went out to her and I said, I understand that you're really struggling right now, but we are very close to somebody needing to call the police because you have been that disruptive. There are people in apartments upstairs who might be sleeping. You need to either quiet your voice down, agree to get some help, or you need to move along where you're not in this disruptive state right now. But I did that by kneeling down next to her, saying her name, speaking to her very quietly and calmly with a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy. I still said the things I said, and she stopped. Now, will she do that again? Yes, because she has a severe mental illness that she is currently not taking care of. But just a little bit of kindness goes, and another really,
and I think we're probably similar in that, but that's probably because you've spent a lifetime or so of I around you know, people who are different, like, and I will give people my card, and especially if they're struggling with, if I think they're struggling with substance abuse, not like schizophrenia or something, you know, there's some great recovery in this community. And if you ever are in a place where you want to get sober, call me. I will connect you with people. So, I think that can do a lot to de-escalate a situation, is by identifying with someone's humanity.
Yeah.
And being like, hey,
are you okay?
Are you okay? What's going on? But not everyone
can do that. Or should do
can,
that.
Or
Yep. Some of that you should leave to the service providers or to the police as well. But engaging with people outside of those crises is completely safe.
Yeah.
You know, if you see someone with all their bags sitting on a bench downtown, rather than turning your head and walking away because you're fearful that they may ask you for something or maybe not make sense when they respond back to you, just further separates us. It's okay. Like I tell my husband all the time, there's panhandlers everywhere, right? And a lot of times people who are panhandling are not experiencing homelessness, but sometimes they are. But I always tell my husband, like even, you know, there's quite a few people down at Walmart, for example. I'll roll down my window and just say, hey, I don't have anything for you, but I really hope you have a good day. It does no harm. It makes the person feel just slightly more human that day. And ultimately, if they start to recognize you and you start to recognize them, then all of those scary parts kind of melt away. We just can't be that afraid of each other all the time. And I think giving some tools to businesses or downtown residents even to start that is a really good place for us to kind of move through that together. And there also are people down here already doing that. I have cameras around the third place, and I was reviewing some footage from last night because there was some garbage that I was trying to figure out how it got there. I'm like a private investigator with these things now. And I watched a woman who lives in the condos nearby. An individual was sitting on our front corner and she was struggling. I could tell on the cameras. And this woman had shared with me previously that she had given her some clothes before. And I watched her walk by with her dog, pause, greet her, ask her if she was okay, empathize with the fact that she didn't have anywhere to go, continue to walk by with her dog. And the person, you could tell, paused for a minute, relaxed a little bit, and stopped engaging in some of the, you know, yelling and sort of talking to themselves that they were doing. And that was just a neighbor. There was just a neighbor who had seen that person often enough in a decent state where they could communicate and had engaged with her enough that when she was struggling a little bit, she knew she had that relationship with her and could do that.
Yeah.
And so that is happening down here. I think more of that can happen just by providing some of those tools to people to give them some confidence. And it doesn't mean that you have to do it every time, and it certainly doesn't mean you ever do it when there is a safety risk.
Well, and to be very clear, people with mental illness are safe. Even people who are yelling and being, you know, let's say 99.99% of the unhoused population is safe, even if they're acting a little bit disruptive. The reality or the facts would say that nothing is going to happen to you.
Correct. In fact, the statistics show that people experiencing homelessness are something, I'm going to make this up, but it's atrocious, are like 5 or 6 times more likely to be the victim of crime themselves than perpetuate crime on other people. By and large,
they are the vulnerable ones.
They are the vulnerable
in the
ones.
situation.
Yes.
Not me.
Yes.
And the 0.01% is the argument, not the argument, but it is the fantasy or the scary thought or the overwhelming, what if I'm confronted with this? What's the plan? That might be in the heads of some people who are struggling with this. And that and that's not to undermine their, you know, as we're having compassion and curiosity, we have to have that compassion and curiosity toward people who struggle with but what if, you know, what if I'm in here? So I work downtown. I'm right across from the Pancake House. I have a giant window that's looking in at what I'm doing. If it's nighttime, it's just me highlighted. Like, look at that like woman in there all by herself.
Yeah.
Never felt unsafe down here. But if I did, or if someone was like banging on the window or trying to get in, you know, I would call 911.
Yeah, of course.
It's like you have this hard job, I think, being in the spot that you're in, or other social service providers, of everyone wanting to be like, but what do I do if it's the 0.01%?
You call 911 like we would do, and we're okay with that. We don't want people to be unsafe either. I don't want anybody to be unsafe. I actually, it might sound weird, but I think that's a really important thing to pause on, is that everyone has the right to their boundaries around safety and what they, you know, and that even the social service community, if someone is being
outright violent, hitting someone.
Correct.
So that even the folks who work in the homeless community are like, you can set that boundary for yourself.
Yeah.
You can call 911.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And nor should you take any amount of verbal abuse. There's a difference between somebody maybe having a mental health crisis and saying things as opposed to somebody really screaming at you about something, but that makes people feel unsafe too, and you have a right to that boundary as well. I don't now, and I won't let people have space in the third place that use racist language or are maybe having, bad language is like whatever, but directing that bad language at people. The goal is that it's a space where the majority of people can feel safe. And so if you are a person that is not going to meet those community guidelines, you're not going to be welcome there either.
Yeah.
Obviously, there'll be a zero tolerance policy on violence. We're working on our community guidelines for this space right now. And one of the things that we're really doing a lot of work around is, what do those sort of restrictions look like? The city's had some questions about that. Like, if somebody were to become violent, how long before they could access the space again? Would they ever be able to access the space again? There's a lot of different models out there to use. Restorative justice can kind of be used in some ways, especially in a community hub like we're going to have. But
And I think that is so important. So I hear you saying very clearly that you're allowed to have boundaries. The third place is allowed to have boundaries. Residents, tenants, business owners, because I think when these parts get activated, it's like it'll become, there will be no rules anymore. Downtown will become a wild west of anything goes, and we don't have any control. And I think that is what people get really worked up about. And so even to hear that the most compassionate space in the community still has boundaries around safety, verbal abuse, and that it is okay to tell someone, we want you to be well, we hope that you get help, but you can't act like that here.
Yeah, you might be cranky and grouchy and really difficult to work with, and you might just want to be left alone, or you might, need to come in and vent and yell because of that, but it is not okay to be abusive towards other people under any circumstances, whether you're in crisis or not. That's not okay.
Is there a piece around the police department? I've kept you for so long. So
you're fine.
Okay. In Davenport, where our office is, we have had a couple things happen, and we do see children. And so there were a couple people who were kind of using our dumpster as like a bathroom and maybe sleeping behind it. And so we had a couple different days where clients had come out, and he wasn't exposing himself. He was literally going to the bathroom. But we see children who've had histories of sexual abuse. And so that's like this example of two people's rights, a person who's unhoused right to exist and to use the bathroom, and this little kid coming out of a mental health facility, needing to feel safe. Yep. And there's not this man there who's like got his pants down. And so, what we did, because it was like it kept happening, so needing to like trespass someone.
Yep.
Is there any confusion among business owners or reluctance, or like if you have to set a boundary, you have to go through the process? So you have to call, the police might come. Will they actually trespass that person? I almost got trespassed yesterday. So
yeah, you should be the expert on this right now.
Being where someone was like, we don't want you here. But what is that like in Illinois with just, if someone is having kind of repeated behavior, it's very harmful to the people around them. What is that like?
And they keep coming back.
They keep coming back.
Yeah.
They're not respecting the boundary. And now it is kind of a law enforcement issue. What is getting the support? And again, we're talking about 0.001%, but
it happens.
What is that process like?
Well, I initially thought of two things. One, so the peeing behind the dumpster thing, that to me, there's two things there. One is, like, as a community, we first have to figure out, have we given that person any place to go to the bathroom before we start being punitive. Two, can we educate to some degree? We can, about like, if that is something you need to do, can you find a more private place to do it? Because these are all the risks with you doing it, where you're doing it, in front of who you're doing it in front of, both to you and the other people. Mm-hmm. And then three, if it is repeated and continues to occur, yes, I do believe that there is a similar process on the Illinois side, where you can have somebody trespassed from a property. I mean, then basically what that means is if they're back on the property, they go to jail, and probably only go to jail overnight and get back out, if that, in part because of the Safety Act, which is another reason why there's more unsheltered folks on the streets right now.
And to pause for a moment, the Safety Act you're referring to is that in Illinois, laws were passed where there's no sort of bond or bail, and so people are put in jail but they get right back out. I'm not totally like up to date on what that.
Yeah, so the generality is essentially that the jails are not holding, as I guess would be, as many people for as long, and for less serious crimes you're getting out faster. Now, not that I believe that jail is a solution to homelessness. It is obviously not. However, it is another reason that people who may have like picked up a lower charge and been in jail for 3 weeks or a month now are in and out, in and out. So there is more unsheltered population because of that too. That wasn't the law's intent, but that was an outcome of, I think, that law getting passed. Again, it's another example of how something good without the proper back end planning and funding can cause issues elsewhere like this.
It's so complicated, all the layers.
But
really points to all the collaboration, the relationships, the connections that are necessary for a community approach that seeks permission from all the parts and gets everybody at the table. And I hope, I try not to, I obviously have like strong opinions about everything. I'm like, should I not have any opinions? But then I have too many. So
you're like, I can't help it. I'm going to share them all.
But my real desire is that they allow this third place to go forward and come up with regional approaches.
Yeah.
Almost like this big pause was kind of a reflection of, we haven't done enough work to communicate and to get people connected, make sure we're all connected here in the downtown. Yeah. But I don't see any reason why those two things can't happen at the same time.
Yeah, I think they can, and I'm really hopeful too. I don't have 100% certainty that on August 25th that the third place will be excluded from the moratorium, but I have some faith that that is going to be possible. And I also spent some time with some city staffers today and shared with them that I would love to be a part, the third place, but me specifically, I'm not going to lie, I love policy and regulatory things and data that supports those decisions. I think I also really enjoy. So there is a lot of evidence as well that when cities or counties get involved, things are actually better because they have knowledge that we don't, and infrastructure that we don't, and advocacy ability that we don't. And this is not the third place. And, I can really only speak for the third place in this conversation, but the third place by no means wants the city sort of just out of our business. The more that we can be in conversation and communication with each other, the more we can set, we want to see good policy in organizations as well, and good follow through in organizations as well. And so I think that we can do both at the same time. I think that we can also all acknowledge, all of us in this process, the third place, other providers, downtown community members and businesses, the city, the Downtown Alliance. We can all acknowledge collectively that this kind of didn't go very well. We all kind of made some mistakes here. We did by not speaking to business owners soon enough. That's something, if I had to give anybody advice moving forward, it would be center the voices that matter the most, but don't wait to talk to the people that might be directly affected. We waited too long. That's on us. The city not seeking experts out before putting out a moratorium, in my opinion, is something that they could have done better. You know, downtown business owners, you know, maybe doing a better job of just trying to understand how the services operate a little bit more, what nonprofits have the ability to do and what we don't. You know, the third place isn't going to solve all the problems. There's still going to be people loitering down here. There's still going to be people with severe mental illness. There's still going to be an increase in homelessness. We're not going to overpromise that we're going to just like, you know, it's going to open and poof, you're never going to see a person struggling down here again. But, you know, kind of understanding what we have the ability to do and what we don't, I think is something downtown business owners maybe could have done a better job of. I think collectively we can all just acknowledge that this has kind of sucked.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
You know, what does Thurgood always say? Turn your... oh God, I'm going to get it wrong. It's like turn the bad thing that happened into the victory.
Yeah. Or like, I love this saying, our old grants manager used to say this all the time. And I always say it to myself, progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a recovery thing.
Yes.
Progress, not perfection.
Yes.
Yeah.
This has stalled some progress, but let's get back on the track of progress here, which is our organization wants to do things the right way. We want to make a difference. We want to do it here in Rock Island. We also want to bring dollars to Rock Island to make that difference. You know, we just were awarded a $30,000 grant from the Doris and Victor Day Foundation. That money is going back right here into this community. It's going to pay people who are going to eat lunch down here, you know. Poor La Flama is going to see us every single day.
But I love that out of this, a little bit of chaos.
A little bit of chaos. You know, it's been very stressful.
Lessons to be learned. But I think what's beautiful about it is the overwhelming answer is that we need to lean into one another.
Yes.
We need to be more strongly connected. We can't be in these different silos.
Yeah.
That in the world at large, like it can feel so overwhelming. But in Rock Island, I mean, I would hate to ever lose our spirit. And our spirit is to be the place where the winter shelter is and the third place is.
Yeah.
And I would never want to lose that. And can we also do business development? Can we also, and I think we can.
We can. Other communities are doing both, right? Like
yes.
There are hundreds of examples of other communities across the United States that have an even larger challenge with unsheltered homelessness than we do, and yet are seeing, you know, a lot of vibrancy and economic movement. And so I know we can do it.
Yeah, and that we are a place that is attractive to people thinking about moving to this area, or maybe with political changes coming here from Iowa or from a different city to say, you know, in Rock Island, we don't look away from anything that is hard.
Yeah.
And rather than shut down, we're going to lean into each other harder, even when we don't agree. We're going to try to be with each other with compassion and curiosity and get creative. We're going to find the synergy. Like I'm doing this stuff at Century Woods. There's a whole building that's vacant right now. There are tons of empty apartments because that property has been so mismanaged, that are sitting there. And I've made friends with a guy is homeless, comes once a week to try to check on his application. He's been living out of his car waiting for 3 months to get into Century Woods. So there, you know, there's like stuff that you're like, are we connected? Yeah, we are, because there's a bunch of housing that is not filled. You know, there is room probably for doing something with these apartments downtown or anywhere for mixed income housing for, I don't know. We're going to do cool things here, and it's going to be different.
Yeah,
and
that's the theme of this podcast right now.
Yes.
Good things can happen if we all just talk to each other more.
Yes.
That's it. That's been, you know, and again, it has been sort of profound for me personally that in the desire to rebuild other people's community or give them a space to do that. I don't for a second think they need to be taught how. I believe people know how to create their own community if given the right resources and space to be able to do that. I'm no expert. We're all our own experts, right? So like in the effort to help other people rebuild their own community, I've started to discover more of my own through that process. Like we've met, you know, I've had wonderful conversations with a few older people that really broke down some barriers for me that made me feel more connected to Rock Island even than I was before. You know, reconnecting with, you know, my husband and I running a business down here for as long as we did. We have a lot of good friends and acquaintances that are still running businesses down here, but we haven't maybe been engaging with them in that way because we've been doing other things, and being able to reconnect with them through some of these conversations. We all need to stop being so afraid of each other and just go talk to people. That's really, you know, at the end of the day, if any lessons were learned here, I hope that we talk more, even though I'm tired of talking.
I know, I've kept you here for so long.
No, not today, but just generally, right? But yeah, I hope that we all just talk more to each other.
I love that. That might be a wonderful place to end, is just, you know, I think we can solve problems. We can have differences of opinion, but if we lean into each other and find productive, connected ways to communicate.
Yeah. Rock Island can be the coolest, most awesome, vibrant, full of business and help for people that need it. We can do it all at the same time.
I love it. Yeah. I look forward to doing it with you.
Yay.
And we will, I'm sure, you know, our kids are now going to school together and you're going to be down the street. So I'm sure we'll be connected.
Yes, we will.
Well, thank you so much, Christie.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. It was a pleasure.
All right. Yay. We did it.
We did it.
2 hours later, basically.
That's okay. That's good. Are you going to chop it up?
No. I can't thank Christie enough for joining me today on Rock Island Line. Conflict, issues, hard things are part of living in a community. And I think what I take away from this conversation is that the more we come together, lean into one another, have conversations and deepen connections, the better off we are while we struggle to solve these hard problems. If you liked today's episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast or to our YouTube channel and leaving us a good review. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Rock Island Line.